metaphorical rug can be pulled from under your feet quite quick at any point. You maybe think to yourself, it won't happen to us. But when it does happen to you, yeah, then it takes you into some pretty not great places.
The cameras flickered on, and the nation held its breath. In a voice trembling with restraint, Prince William confirmed what millions had feared, a tragic update on King Charles's health.
Buckingham Palace has said King Charles spent a short period of time in hospital today after experiencing the temporary side effects of his cancer treatment.
Gasps echoed through Buckingham Palace corridors as aides exchanged silent, stunned glances. Was it the relentless stress of the crown, a hidden complication from his recent treatments, or something far graver still? Across Britain, sorrow turned to dread. And as William's final words faded, one question lingered.
The solutions are out there. There is real solutions to these problems.
How much longer can the king hold on? The weight of a son's words. When Prince William stepped before the cameras, his voice was steady, but the world could feel the weight pressing behind it. Every word seemed to carry the full burden of the crown, the family and the nation watching from every corner of the globe. "My father's condition is stable," he said softly, "but his illness is incurable. We are cherishing the time we have together." The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. It wasn't just the confirmation of a rumor, it was the acknowledgment of a truth too painful to disguise. Outside Buckingham Palace, grief and disbelief mingled in the air. Thousands gathered, standing shoulder to shoulder in the chill of a gray afternoon, clutching flowers, candles, and phones that streamed the moment again and again. Some prayed, quietly. Others simply stared at the palace windows, hoping for movement, a shadow, anything. Reporters lined the mall like sentinels, cameras fixed on the balcony that had seen so many royal waves, now drawn behind velvet curtains. Across oceans, headlines erupted. News anchors' tones shifted from speculation to sorrow. The words incurable and cherishing echoed across time zones, two words that reshaped how the world saw their monarch. For months, there had been whispers. King Charles, diagnosed with cancer in early 2024, had continued to fulfill his duties, attending meetings, greeting ambassadors, and maintaining the public calm that defined his reign. But those close enough to witness him privately saw the difference: the slower movements, the longer pauses, the fatigue that no public smile could conceal. It wasn't the first time the king had faced pain with such quiet dignity. In his younger years, Charles was the image of strength and determination. He rose before dawn, rode for hours through the damp Scottish air, and found peace in the simplicity of soil and saddle. His devotion to polo and the countryside was legendary, not for leisure, but as proof of endurance. To him, health was discipline, and resilience was duty. But time, relentless as it is, began to test that discipline. Surgeries and injuries came in waves. The knee operation in 1998, a hernia repair in 2003, the minor procedures that followed in later years. Each time, he emerged smiling, shaking hands with nurses and waving to photographers, determined to show that the body could yield without surrender. Yet those closest to him began to sense a quiet shift, a deeper reflection on fragility, on legacy, on the limits of strength itself. Now, as William faced the cameras, that legacy seemed to stand behind him, proud, weathered, unbroken. The king who had once played through pain now inspired a son who spoke through heartbreak. The monarchy had always been about endurance, about holding one's head high, no matter the storm. But this time, even endurance had a cost. And as the palace remained still under the November sky, Britain waited, suspended between gratitude and grief, wondering how much longer the silence would last. But when the silence finally breaks, will it mark the end of a reign or the beginning of a reckoning within the crown? Stay tuned. The turning of the crown. It began as a perfectly ordinary morning in London, the kind the city is famous for. A cool mist hung in the air, The sky wore its usual shade of silver grey, and the hum of routine life surrounded Buckingham Palace. The royal guards stood firm in their scarlet coats, their faces still as stone. The palace clock struck its familiar chime, echoing across the courtyard with crisp precision. Inside, courtiers glided through the marble halls, their calm footsteps blending into the quiet rhythm of duty. It was, by all appearances, just another royal morning. But at exactly 9:47 a.m., everything changed. It began as a murmur, a faint whisper that slipped through the palace corridors like a draft. At first, no one wanted to believe it. A butler paused mid-step, a maid dropped her tray, and an aide stared blankly at the floor. The stillness that followed was almost unreal. Then, the words that no one ever expected were spoken aloud, trembling and sharp. "The king has been taken ill." In an instant, the palace, that had always seemed unshakable, became a hive of chaos. Guards who normally moved with ceremonial grace began running. The golden gates, symbols of elegance and tradition, clanged shut with urgency. Motorcades appeared out of nowhere, black cars speeding through the courtyard as doors slammed and voices rose in confusion. The air buzzed with tension. Telephones rang non-stop. Messages were whispered from one trembling hand to another. The calm had been replaced by something far darker, the unmistakable pulse of fear. Behind those centuries-old stone walls, a storm had begun to gather. By midday, the world received its first glimpse of that storm. The official royal statement arrived, brief, cold, and cryptic. His Majesty is under medical supervision following complications from treatment. That was all. No photographs of reassurance, no smiling doctors, no royal wave from a hospital balcony. Just a single line. And then silence. But that silence was deafening. Across Britain, it echoed through living rooms, offices, and crowded streets. News anchors stumbled over their words, reporters camped outside the palace gates, and millions of people whispered the same haunting question. What's happening to the king? The great halls, once filled with laughter and ceremony, were now silent, but for the echo of hurried footsteps and the soft hum of prayers whispered by anxious hearts. Outside, the crowd grew larger, pressed against the gates, faces pale with worry and curiosity. Candles began to appear on the pavement, small flickering lights in the growing dusk. And within those palace walls, history was holding its breath. Inside the palace, the atmosphere grew heavier with every hour. The staff moved like ghosts, speaking in hushed tones, afraid that even the walls might be listening. They knew what the public did not, that this was not a routine illness, not a passing faint or a fever. It was serious, terrifyingly serious. The king, the man who had waited his entire life for the throne, now lay battling to remain upon it. The crown that had once symbolized triumph now felt like a burden too heavy to bear. As the day turned to evening, the skies above London seemed to mirror the mood inside the palace, grey, heavy, and waiting for the rain to fall. The monarchy had faced wars, scandals, and storms before, but never this. Never such a sudden, intimate fear, because this was not about politics or power. It was about a man, frail and mortal, beneath the weight of his crown. The day that began with calm dignity had ended in trembling uncertainty. The golden age of the king, so long awaited, now hung by a thread. And as midnight approached, one truth became clear to everyone who whispered in the shadows. The fate of the crown rested on the beating heart of one man, and that heart was faltering. How did Prince William summon the courage to confirm the tragic news? How had Charles been coping with the crown before the illness? What were the silent struggles he had behind the scene? Let's find out. Courage behind the crown. King Charles has faced one of the most challenging periods of his life over the past few years, as his health has taken a difficult turn. particularly following his cancer diagnosis. What was supposed to be a season of celebration and stability after his long-awaited coronation turned into a time of uncertainty, concern, and resilience for both the king and the royal family. Less than a year after he ascended the throne, news broke that the monarch had been diagnosed with an undisclosed form of cancer. The discovery came unexpectedly, while receiving treatment for an enlarged prostate. Complications, often also associated with aging, doctors found signs of something more. Journey serves as an inspiring reminder that strength is not the absence of struggle, but the ability to rise above it with grace. Now that the king has fallen seriously ill, how did the members of the royal family react? Were they defensive? Did they point fingers? Let's dive into the details of the reaction from the royal family. These experiences have reminded the world that beneath the crowns, titles, and royal ceremonies lie real people, vulnerable yet resilient. King Charles's story, marked by illness and perseverance, stands as a testament to the power of determination and faith in the face of adversity. And as he continues to heal and lead, his both beloved figures withdrew from public life to focus on recovery, testing the family's strength and unity. For Prince William, balancing his royal duties while caring for his ailing father and wife became overwhelming. Describing 2024 as the hardest year of my life and a dreadful experience, he revealed a rare glimpse of vulnerability, showing that even royalty cannot escape the deep emotional toll of illness and personal struggle. Meanwhile, the king began what would become a long and ongoing course of treatment. Details of his condition were kept private, in line with royal tradition, but it was clear that his health journey was far from easy. For more than a year, King Charles has quietly endured therapy and medical supervision, with his schedule significantly reduced. As for the Princess of Wales, she recently shared the hopeful news that she is now in remission, a message that lifted the spirits of millions who had followed her journey with empathy and admiration. Her courage has mirrored the quiet strength of her father-in-law, reminding many that even in moments of royal glamour, there are deeply human stories of pain, endurance, and hope. Together, serious. The revelation came as a shock not only to the king himself, but also to a nation that had just watched him officially take on the weight of the crown after the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. The diagnosis sent ripples of worry through the United Kingdom and beyond. The public, who had celebrated his coronation with grandeur, suddenly found themselves praying and hoping for his recovery. Yet, this was not just a health battle for one man. It soon became a trying time for the entire royal family. In a heartbreaking turn of events, Princess Kate Middleton was diagnosed with cancer around the same time as the king, shaking the royal family to its core. Public appearances became fewer, and each re-emergence was met with warmth, applause, and deep respect from the British people, many of whom admired his courage and commitment to continue serving, even while fighting a personal battle. Despite his health challenges, the king has slowly and steadily begun to return to his public duties. His presence at official events has grown more frequent in recent months, a sign that he is regaining strength and stability. Those close to him say he remains determined, disciplined, and deeply reflective, qualities that have defined his character throughout his decades of public service. The unexpected announcements. The unexpected changes began with the new reign. Once the king took the throne, the royal household began a full review of patronages, presidencies, and links with charities. This was not a small step, but a wide remapping of who would stay on as patron, which causes would pass to others, and which ties would end. Nothing on this scale had been attempted in decades. The aim was to make the new reign match today's priorities and the time available from working royals. It also showed early on that many of the roles once held under the late Queen would not simply continue out of tradition, but would instead be looked at closely. Although the review took months and was done quietly, many people were shocked when the results were finally made public. Let's take a closer look at what really happened. The first big announcement that drew public attention was that many patronages would be given up. This was explained as a practical step to keep the family's workload realistic, but for the organizations it came as a surprise. Hundreds of charities had grown used to the status of a royal link and had tied parts of their identity to it. The palace said it was not possible to keep every connection, and so a cut had to be made. The move was presented as a way to direct energy where it mattered most, but it stood out as one of the first clear signs that the new reign would look different. Soon after, the results of the review were made public through lists and press notes. These showed in detail which groups would keep their patron, which would gain a new one, and which would lose the link entirely. Stepping down as Colonel of the Scots Guards was a clear sign of the times. He had served for decades, attending parades and regimental events, but age was catching up. His decision marked how older royals were slowly reducing their duties, allowing the family to rely on a smaller circle of working members. At the same time, the royal family pointed out the major renovation work going on at Buckingham Palace. The works had been running for years, but now they were a central subject. The project was called the most extensive in the palace's history. The cost ran into hundreds of millions, funded by a rise in the sovereign grant. The palace said the work was unavoidable, warning that the building risked serious breakdowns if nothing was done. Because of the works, Buckingham Palace could not be used as before. Another announcement confirmed that state visits and large receptions would be moved elsewhere. Now, as Queen, her list was widened to reflect trust in her role and permanence within the system. The way it was shown to the public stressed that she was not just filling empty spots, but adding to work she had already done. Some charities that kept or gained her support made sure to thank her. Shelterbox, a disaster relief group, confirmed she would remain their patron. The Queen's Nursing Institute also voiced its gratitude, pointing to the importance of her link. These statements showed that the review was not only about losses, but also about gains. At the same time, another announcement showed how the royal family was managing change across generations. The Duke of Kent, cousin of the late Queen and one of the longest-serving royals, started handing over his military roles. Further changes continued among senior royals. The Duke of Kent's step back was part of a larger pattern of older royals doing less. Reports spoke of retirements and handovers. All of these decisions were meant to improve the system. But here's the twist. They've deeply affected several royals and continue to shake things up behind palace walls. One of the most surprising impacts? Queen Camilla herself, who has reportedly been pushed to the edge by recent developments. Stay with us, because what we're about to uncover about Camilla might just leave you speechless. For charities that had waited in uncertainty, this was a turning point. Those kept on felt relief. Those cut felt disappointment. Some had held a royal name for over a century, so losing it was a major change. A key part of the outcome was a bigger role for Queen Camilla. She was confirmed as patron of about 15 new organizations. These included groups for nursing, literacy, and volunteer work, areas she had long supported. For Camilla, this was both steady progress and an expansion. As Duchess of Cornwall, she had built a profile around reading and support for victims of domestic abuse. Windsor Castle and St. James's Palace were chosen as alternatives. This was practical, but marked a break with tradition. For many decades, foreign leaders had been welcomed in the same grand rooms, and their closure changed the feel of these events. The palace said the move was only for the duration of the works, but since the project would take years, the change was set to shape much of the reign. With such vast sums at stake, the cost of the works quickly became a public issue. There was debate on whether taxpayers should pay for the palace's modernization. Those who support the idea said it was essential upkeep for a national landmark and would prevent costly repairs later. The palace defended its choice by pointing to technical needs, while the trustees of the sovereign grant spoke of oversight. Official financial reports gave more detail. The household's accounts showed rising costs in areas like energy and staff pay. These reports were used to explain why cuts were needed. They also tied into the palace's wider message of modernization and tighter control of spending. The full size of the review became clear when reports said nearly 200 organizations were affected. This wasn't just a small change, it was a major reshuffle. Meanwhile, but what exactly is driving her frustration? And what could this mean for her role in the royal family, moving forward? The silent reunion. The news didn't come with the usual royal fanfare, no press conferences, no grand announcements. Instead, it slipped quietly through a leaked advisory marked Private Royal Schedule, October 1st, 2025, 11 a.m. A date and time that would mark history. After nearly 4 long years of silence and bitter tension, Prince William and Prince Harry were finally set to meet face to face. The chosen place, a secluded family chapel, hidden deep within the Sandringham estate. A place where their mother, Princess Diana, once prayed in solitude. No cameras were permitted. No journalists lurking in the shadows. Even palace staff had been cut down to a handful of trusted aides. This was not an official engagement. It was something far more personal. The monarchy had not seen such a strain in decades. What loomed wasn't about royal duties or public appearances. It was about 2 brothers, once inseparable, now fractured by scandal, resentment, and grief. Standing under the same roof again, he quoted the words she whispered before public appearances. "You are more than the name on your badge." Every person in the room could feel the change. The air itself seemed to carry her presence. The brothers' tension didn't vanish, but for a brief moment, Diana's spirit filled the gap between them. William admitted what few had dared to say aloud. It was sacred, because this wasn't about royal protocol or power. It was about a mother whose legacy still commanded the hearts of kings and sons alike. William stepped back slowly, and every gaze turned toward Harry. For years, Harry had spoken about Diana through documentaries and interviews, often in defiance of the family that kept her memory guarded. But never before had he done it here, inside these walls, face to face with his brother. Now the room waited. The air thickened. What would he say? How would he answer his brother's heartfelt words? Stay close, because the next words might just rewrite royal history. "We've both made choices," he said quietly, "but none that she would have wanted to divide us." He didn't mention Meghan. He didn't touch the scandals or interviews. He spoke only of their mother's love, the thread that once tied them together, and perhaps could again. When his words ended, the silence that followed was not cold. He had spoken not as the heir to the throne, but as a son, remembering the woman who had shaped his heart. When he began to speak, his voice was steady, though heavy with emotion. "She once told us," he said slowly, "that love is the only legacy worth leaving. I forgot that for a while the chapel grew still. No one expected it, not from William, known for his restraint and duty. But he continued, reaching back into memory instead of blame. He spoke of Diana's compassion, of the day she took them to a homeless shelter in Brixton back in 1993. He recalled how she had told them, "These are the people we serve, not the cameras." Then, in a softer tone, the palace was silent, but tense. Aides moved like ghosts through the halls. Every word, every glance felt like it could ignite a new headline. Insiders were told to keep their mouths shut, but as always, secrets have a way of slipping through. At exactly 11:08 a.m., the chapel doors opened. The moment everyone thought would never happen finally did. No photographers, no applause, just the sound of footsteps echoing against the stone floor. William entered first, expression calm but unreadable, followed by one senior aide who stood discreetly behind him. A few seconds later, Harry appeared, his head slightly bowed, his stride measured. Their eyes met briefly across the aisle. No words were exchanged. No smile. No handshake. Yet, neither turned away. For a family built on formalities and frost, that simple act of acknowledgement felt monumental. Outside, millions watched live coverage of an empty chapel doorway, hanging on every second. Rumors had flooded the media for months. Claims that Harry had sworn never to return, that William had refused to see him until apologies were made. But now, they were both there. Not for the crown, not for the monarchy, but for her, Diana. The one name was powerful enough to pull them back together after everything that had gone wrong. Inside those quiet walls, surrounded by memories of their mother, something began to shift. Hours later, one small leak would send shockwaves across the world. Prince William's words. The broken marriage, the painful scandals, the sense of betrayal that had once rocked the crown. To many, the move wasn't just administrative, it was symbolic. It was William and Anne drawing a line in the sand, reminding the world that Diana's memory still shaped the monarchy's future. The storm showed no signs of calming. Every talk show, every headline, every trending hashtag kept pulling the story in new directions. Yet one thing was clear. The decision had cracked open the heart of royal drama, reigniting passions, and forcing the world to ask what loyalty, blood, and legacy truly mean inside the House of Windsor. Tears in the palace. At 76, King Charles III is said to have broken down in private, overwhelmed with tears after a deeply unsettling confrontation with two of the people closest to him, his son, Prince William, and his sister, Princess Anne. What shook him so deeply was not just their words, but the weight of their demand, one that could redraw the boundaries of royal life forever. Both William and Anne reportedly stood firm, presenting the king with a shocking ultimatum: to completely cut ties with Queen Camilla's family. Their request was not vague or symbolic. It was precise and absolute. They wanted Camilla's relatives excluded from every layer of royal involvement, financially, socially, and even in the background roles they had quietly begun to occupy within palace circles. What had once started as whispered tension behind gilded palace doors has now escalated into what insiders are calling nothing less than a royal reset. This phrase, simple yet dramatic, suggests that what is unfolding is far bigger than a family disagreement. It points to a potential reshaping of the monarchy itself, its traditions, its power structures, and the identity it projects to the nation and the world. For King Charles, the demand is particularly heartbreaking. Throughout his decades as heir apparent, he long struggled with the public's perception of his private life. His marriage to Diana, the painful divorce, and his enduring love for Camilla all shaped how the world saw him. After years of criticism and scandal, finally seeing Camilla crowned as queen consort beside him during his coronation was, to Charles, both a personal victory and a sign of acceptance. Yet now, the very family he relies on to secure the monarchy's future is challenging that chapter of his life in the most dramatic way. Prince William, the heir to the throne, is said to be especially resolute. To him, the monarchy must be leaner, more modern, and free of what he sees as unnecessary complications. Camilla's family, with their growing presence, reportedly represents a risk, one that could blur the lines between the crown's duties and personal indulgence. Princess Anne, known for her no-nonsense approach and unshakable loyalty to duty, has reportedly sided with William. Her alignment with him makes the demand harder for Charles to dismiss, for Anne's reputation as the most hard-working royal gives her opinions added weight. The tension has become a battle not only over family loyalty, but also over the monarchy's long-term survival. If Charles refuses, he risks alienating his son and sister, creating fractures that may weaken the institution from within. If he agrees, he risks betraying the woman who has stood beside him for decades and reshaping his legacy in a way he never intended. What happens next could alter the monarchy for generations. Is this the beginning of a bold new era, one that resets the balance of tradition and modernity, or the spark of a deeper family rift that may never truly heal? The world watches, waiting to see which path King Charles will choose. What exactly did William and Anne say? Why did it affect the king so much? How weighty were the words? Let's delve into the depth of the words that brought the king to tears.